Hey everyone, we are going to do an introduction to page 177 and 179 in the Grammar and Composition 2 book. So please turn to page 177. We're talking about adjective clauses. Okay, so a clause is a group of words that contains both a subject and a verb, and it's used as part of a sentence. Okay, an independent clause is a sentence. An independent clause expresses a complete thought and can stand alone as a sentence. So if you can walk up to the room in front of people and state that clause and then walk away and people understand what you said, they're not waiting for more, then you've got a clause. For example, you walk to the front of the room and you said, Mr. Thompson is the pastor who preached on Sunday. And then you walk away. Well, although it's a very short speech and it may not be that much, valuable information to people, it is a complete thought, and you can walk away and people understood it, and that's, it. Now, the next one, a dependent or subordinate clause does not express a complete thought and cannot stand alone. For example, if I walked to the front of the room and cleared my throat and I said, Mr. Thompson is the pastor who preached on Sunday. That's independent. They want you to look at who preached on Sunday. So if I walked up to the front of the room and said, who preached on Sunday, not a question, but a statement, and walked away, people would say, well, that doesn't make sense. That's just part of a statement. That's not the whole thing. Who preached on Sunday? But the entire thought, Mr. Thompson is the pastor who preached on Sunday. Mr. Thompson is the pastor. That's a complete thought. But if I walked up and said, who took my basket of fruit? Who took my basket of fruit? That's not a complete thought. So anyway, excuse me. The dependent clause that modifies a noun or a pronoun is called an adjective clause. Okay, so the whole clause is being used as one adjective. Mr. Thompson is the pastor who preached on Sunday. That whole clause right there, that clause, subject, verb, prepositional phrase. This clause is the adjective describing pastor. Okay, and then adjective clauses are introduced by words called relatives. Who, whom, which, and that. There's just 4 of them. Those are adjective pronouns. There's 5 total. Who, whom, which, that. Those are relative pronouns, and whose is a relative adjective. WHOSE is a relative adjective. And that just means that who, whom, which, and that inside the context of just the clause, not the whole sentence, but just the clause. In that context, the who, whom, which, or that will be treated as nouns. They'll be the subjects of the sentence, most likely. But if you said whose, that's not going to be the subject. That's going to be an adjective. Whose is actually one of the questions that adjectives answer, isn't it? Which one, what kind, how many, how much, and whose. So, okay. Adjective clauses are introduced by words called relatives. Who, whom, which, and that are relative pronouns. Whose is a relative adjective. A relative serves 2 purposes. It introduces the clause, and it serves a grammatical function within the clause. So if I were to ask you on the homework assignment that is a quiz that you take after you do this work, what are the 2 purposes of a relative? One of the answers is it introduces the clause. Other answer is it serves a grammatical function within the clause. Okay, so for example, Mr. Bloom, who will be our instructor, is a good teacher. Who is the subject of will be, but Mr. Bloom is the subject of the sentence. Who will be our teacher is describing Mr. Bloom. Pastor Brown, whom I admire, is my neighbor. Whom is the direct object. Pastor Brown, comma, whom I admire is my neighbor. Pastor Brown is neighbor is the sentence, but I admire whom in the context of the clause. I is the subject, admire is the verb, whom is the direct object. A botanist is a scientist whose field is plants. In the context of this clause, whose describes field. Field is the subject, is the verb, plants is the predicate nominative. So they say whose modifies the noun field. That means whose is an adjective in the context of this clause. Let's look at this one. There's the clause. That is the incident to which I referred. Which I referred is the object of the preposition to which I referred. I referred which. Spaghetti is a meal that I really enjoy. That is the direct object of enjoy. So it says, I enjoy that. Sometimes the relative pronoun is omitted, but but this understood pronoun still serves its usual purposes. So the Bible is the book we desperately need. Understood pronoun that functions as the direct object of the verb is need. The understood pronoun that functions as the direct object of the verb need. Okay, so we desperately need. The Bible is book, and then the understood pronoun is the word that would be there. Okay? Understood, like the understood you, it's just not there. It should be there, it would be there, but we have learned over time to let it drop. Okay, sorry. I'm going to do the first question here and go to the next page. This is the day which the Lord hath made. Okay, which the Lord hath made is a clause. Well, let's look at the what it asks us to do. Underline each verb 2 times. Underline each subject 1 time. Circle each relative. If the relative pronoun is understood, supply it and circle it. That would be like if it's in this case, we would write the word that and circle it. And then put brackets around each adjective clause. Okay, well, we bracketed the right clause. This is describing day, so that's the adjective clause. There should be 2 sets of subjects and verbs because we have 2 clauses. We have the independent clause and we have the dependent clause. So this is the day the Lord has made. Hath is a word for has. So, and then we got to circle the relative, which is which. Make sense? I wrote over my brackets. Okay, so find your adjective clause, put brackets around it, underline all subjects once, all verbs twice, and circle the relative pronoun or the relative adjective. Okay, let's go to the next page. This is a continuation of exercise A. So we'll start right here. Exercise B. Circle each relative. If the relative pronoun is understood, supply it and circle it. Put brackets around each adjective clause and draw an arrow to the noun or pronoun that the clause modifies. So really, we're not underlining subjects and verbs. We're doing everything else the same, and then we're adding the arrow to the word that's being modified by the adjective clause. Proteins are one of the foods that provide us energy. So there's our adjective clause. That provide us energy. Now, we need to circle our relative, that, which is serving as the subject of this clause, that provide, and then energy is the direct object. But anyway, we circle the word that. Now we got to draw an arrow to the noun or pronoun that the clause modifies. Well, which foods are we talking about? The foods that provide us energy. So I'm going to draw an arrow to foods. We're done with that one. Okay, so everybody understands that. Let's move on to exercise C. Put brackets around each adjective clause in the following selection, and then draw an arrow to the noun or pronoun that the adjective modifies. So we don't have to circle our relatives. We just have to put brackets around the adjective clauses and draw arrows. Okay? All right, Greenland, which is the largest island in the world, is inhabited by descendants of the native Eskimos and Danes who settled Greenland in the 1700s. That's the first sentence. Well, this clause is describing Greenland, I believe. And then this clause is describing Danes. Yeah, that's it. All right, you do the rest of that paragraph, and let's go to the diagramming, my favorite part. Okay, so there's lots of examples, and then just 6 diagrams to do. Let's start at the top. Diagramming adjective clauses. Diagram the independent clause first, okay, just the sentence, the main part that can stand alone. Diagram it first, then diagram the adjective clause below the independent clause and draw a dotted line from the relative pronoun or relative adjective to the noun or pronoun that the clause modifies. Okay, now there's several examples here. I think the best way for us to do this is to actually do the diagramming, and then we'll refer to the one that we need to use. Okay, so it says, first, Dr. Bender, who teaches the Bible, has a radiant testimony. Well, who teaches the Bible is our clause. Dr. Bender is the person who it modifies, the noun it modifies. We have a relative, who, which is also the subject of that sentence. That's the action verb, and this is the direct object in the clause. Now, Dr. Bender is the subject of the independent clause. The linking verb has, and then testimony is what he has. That's predicate nominative. Okay. So let's diagram this thing. See if I can do it without. Let's just do it together. We'll see if I can do it without verifying it first. I'm going to do the whole thing, and then I'll go look and make sure that I told you right. So we're drawing our line for our independent clause first. Dr. Bender has testimony. Dr. Bender has, this is a linking verb, so we draw a slanted line, testimony. And then we have, of course, a and radiant. Okay, now under it, we have to draw our, or do our other simple sentence here. So we've got who teaches, and that's a direct object because teaches is an action verb, Bible. Now, all that's left to do is draw a dotted line from the relative pronoun or relative adjective to the noun or pronoun that the clause modifies. Well, we said that there's the relative pronoun, and we draw a line or a dotted line to the word that it modifies. Well, it modifies Dr. Bender, and who is the relative pronoun? So we're going to draw the dotted line just like that. And we have done the first one. That's all it has to be done. Now, let's look at a couple of things before you go on. This was our example. This is showing, let's see, if the relative is the direct object, then you'll just have to make a slanted dotted line to get over there to the relative pronoun. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Now this one is if we've got the word whose. Remember, whose is the only relative adjective on our list. So this one you'd have to draw it all the way from down here where it's modifying field all the way up there to the word scientist, which is the predicate nominative. Whose is describing scientist. And then let's see. To which, so which is the object of preposition in to which, and that's what you draw that up to incident, which is the to which I referred is modifying the incident. Okay, now here, spaghetti is a meal that I enjoyed. Okay, so I enjoyed that. That is a relative pronoun, is the direct object of the dependent clause, and meal is the predicate nominative, and this clause is modifying meal. So we would have bracketed it like this. Okay. And so you just draw the dotted line from the predicate. I mean, it's really the same as this, except that instead of it being an object of preposition, it is the predicate or the direct object here. And then this last one, this one is going to be the hardest one because this has the X representing, oh, finally. You don't know this, but at midnight, all of the bells, well, our old bell system, the way it works, there's 100 bells, and we use them throughout the day. In a given day, there's 100 bells. We use them throughout the day, and then whatever bells weren't used throughout the day, they all ring right before midnight. So it's midnight now. That's how our bell system works. So I know it's midnight when we get 60 or 70 bells, one right after the other. I hit pause a few times there so you didn't have to endure all that. It takes a while. Okay. Okay, I think I was talking about this. This X represents the understood pronoun. Typically, it's the word that. So just like an understood you, they diagram understood yous with an X instead of the word you. So there's an understood pronoun that serves as the direct object of this clause. So here it is. It's like this. Okay, so we have this clause. There's an understood that. It serves as the direct object. We need that. The whole clause is modifying the word book, and so that's how it's diagrammed. Okay, so you finish up all of that stuff there, and then take the quiz based on the answers that you got, and then I'll see you next time. Okay, we're getting close to the end.